Okay, welcome back to Nerdiverse Christian Couples. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Dan.
And we thought some of you are new listeners to us here in 2025. And with some of the emails and questions that I'm getting, I thought, well, maybe every once in a while we should reintroduce ourselves and our story a little bit. So the short version of the story is our adventure into neurodiversity and autism began when our daughter, our oldest daughter, was diagnosed with autism in 2005, 2006. Our youngest daughter, ADHD, about a year or two after that. And then Dan received his diagnosis in 2019, but about 2013, 2014 is really when we began to sense that in ourselves. I had gone to a conference. Dan accepted that. We started acting as if. We did a renewal of our marriage vows, kind of knowing who we are with the new expectations. And then Dan said, well, if we're going to do a podcast, it can't be just you diagnose me and my self-identification. So we went through the process with Grace Myhill up in Baltimore. And here we are. And so we started Neurodiverse Christian Couples podcast.
November 19th.
Did we? Yeah. November of 2019. I think we did. So, our catalog has over 200 podcasts available to you. Sometimes we're just talking with each other about our relationship. Sometimes we're talking to authors like Dr. Wilder or Dr. Warner, Chris Coursey, or we might talk with autism researchers like Dr. Tony Atwood or Dr. Peter Bermulin. So it could be research-based. It could be your questions that come in based. We might interview other couples. And that's kind of how we've been doing the show. Then, Dan, you started a kind of spin-off show, Just the Guys. So will you kind of talk about that and when it airs?
So those come out monthly, middle of the month, usually the second-ish week on a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So once a month. That is a handful of guys, well, there may be 4 or 5 of us, depending on who's available. And it's all guys that have been identified, either themselves, they self-identify or have a formal diagnosis. And it's us taking a topic and talking about what does that look like? What does it mean? How do we consume it? How do we think about it? What has worked? What has not worked? Sometimes it's relational topics. Sometimes it's work topics, anything that seems like it needs to be anything of interest, really. Somebody will say, let's talk about this. And we'll say, okay. And then we do.
You do. It gets a lot of positive reviews. I think it's helpful for other people kind of new in their process of identification. I hear a lot from wives that helps kind of understand some of the processing or things that they see to take things a little less personal in their own situation. And then sometimes you've had, it's not very common, but sometimes you've had authors or just a single guest on, which is still a male. So it's still just the guys like John Fella of Johnny and Friends, Warner and Wilder. You had Brian Haidt talk about his book, An Intentional Marriage. Just the Guys, again, Wednesdays. Then this year in 2025, I've started a spinoff with our featured coach at Neurodiverse Christian Counselors, and that's Barbara Grants. And you've heard Barbara on the show interviewed. She is also an author of one of the authors of our book, Uniquely Us. And so she and I, it's really long, so I have to psych myself up to say it. The Nerdiverse Couples Coaches Corner. And she and I will talk to other coaches who are either in the field or maybe there's a topic like we're going to talk about attachment to God and how that might be could be used in neurodiverse couples work or your own individual growth work. So look forward to that. That should be out here in February. We start that. And that was probably going to be the second Monday, I think is what I have determined. It will be. And then our podcast can go from 35 to 55 minutes. And so some of them might also end up on YouTube if you're a person who prefers video and you want to watch it in shorter segments.
Yeah, the whole hour isn't on YouTube.
Right. We'll usually chop it up into 2 segments if they're a little bit longer. So that's how to get information from us. And then if you're looking for more resources, we are about to launch in March of 2025, Uniquely Us, and I always have to look at it to read the whole title, Gracefully Navigating the Maze of Neurodiverse Marriage. That is still available right now on pre-order. You can go to www.christianneurodiversemarriage.com. You'll see Uniquely Us, click that tab, and then order from your favorite bookstore, wherever you like to buy books. That is preferably a box store at this moment, because we would like to see the book
Actually, in a store.
In an actual store, because we know it'll end up on the big one that everyone orders books from. So I'm going to go through really quickly some of the contents. We'll talk about our research. What is autism? What it is not. We interviewed men on the spectrum. They're going to talk about what is satisfaction based on their perspective, neurotypicals, what is marriage satisfaction based on their perspective. We talk about similarities and differences in different types of neurodiverse couples. If the woman is on the spectrum, if both are on the spectrum, what if ADHD is in there too? We talk about some sensory stuff, just kind of lay the groundwork for you and why it's so difficult to get an adult diagnosis. Then in chapter 5, our favorite chapter, I think, navigating the maze of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, which is what we're going to talk about today with emotional resilience. And then we have our featured authors. We have Barb Grant's navigating the maze of change and growth, motivation, boundaries, acceptance, and healing. Chapter 7, social language pragmatics with Carol Reller. Hopefully you heard Carol and Greg on the show last month. Chapter 8, navigating the maze of executive function differences, ASD, ADHD, and ADHD. And that's Robin Tate, who has also been on the show. Chapter 9, navigating the maze of diagnosis, self-acceptance, pre-regulation, and curiosity. That is Jeremy Rochford, who is on Just the Guys, who's been on the show with his lovely wife, Charity. And they also wrote chapter 10, which is about parenting as a neurodiverse couple. Then chapter 11, Dr. Mary Jones. She and her husband, Jeff, have been on the podcast at least twice soon. We're in February recording now, so it's going to come out soon this month. They share a little bit more of our story, but Dr. Mary shares the additional challenges of race and bias and stigma for people of color getting a diagnosis. And then we have to kind of turn to, okay, when things don't go as planned, and sometimes where religion and roles and that black and white thinking can lead to abusive behaviors. So I kind of think of it as like the first part is the research. We tell a little bit of our story, kind of how we changed our relational dynamics. Then we switch to, okay, so what can change? Let's reset expectations. And then the third part of the book is if you don't, what's going to happen to Tiny Tim? This is not a good outcome, especially if there's abuse and trauma involved and one party is not doing their part to change that. So be looking for that. And then each semester we have a class that we have built around the book and a workbook around the book. And so we're right now in full swing of that class, and it's full. So you can't join because it is already in progress and full, but you can look for that again in the fall where Dan has the men and I have the women. We keep them small, under 12, because we want people to be under 12 people. So you can talk and ask questions, and it's not a big Facebook Live with like 200 and 300 people. Once we start, we don't allow new people in, so the group can form. Can gel, yes. So any other things you think I should have mentioned about the book?
You did mention that it's part of our story. There is, since this is an intro to us, there is another book.
Right. Okay, so our family wrote a book. It's kind of the prequel. It is Embracing the Autism Spectrum, Finding Joy and Peace in Your Neurodiverse Family Journey. And that one is kind of like from the beginning, from Sydney's diagnosis, how I viewed that and kind of my own faith journey as a mom. And then along the way, the kids getting diagnosed, the family system, our marriage, the tale of two marriages. Dan's marriage is going well. My marriage is not going well. And then the girls being adults now, put their perspective in. Sydney as being one who's diagnosed. Some mental health challenges from the exclusion and bullying that she experienced. Erica speaks on her sibling, and then also having a dad on the spectrum. My favorite line is, I don't know how he thought sitting in a room silent was relationship forming. So we talk a little bit, not too much, about some parenting dynamics. But if you really want to know who we are as a family, it's all in there. The good, bad, and the ugly. We didn't spare truths to put rose-colored glasses on. We talked about the hard things, the good things. And then this purple book is also more research-based and has some practical tips for not only us, but contributing authors who are coaches and thought leaders in the field. And all authors are lived experience, trained, and Christian. So that trifecta effect of what I think makes this book very unique. So Get Uniquely Us is coming out soon. All right, on to our topic, which I'm afraid that book is going to fall and really make a loud sound that we're going to hear about. So I'm just going to move it. Our topic today comes from another class that we're teaching, which is already full. But if you go back to January, we talked with Dr. Marcus. Well, Dan got to talk. I'm very jealous. Dan got to talk with Dr. Marcus Warner and Dr. Jim Wilder, and resilience a little bit was a part of that. We also talked to Dr. Kurt Thompson about shame and how shame can be a barrier to change. Right. So those are two great to listen back to back. But we were at a conference and Dan picked up the book Building Bounce. And so when you saw that, it has nothing to do with neurodiversity or neurodiverse marriage. But when you saw the book, why were you drawn to it? And why did you feel like this is a topic we needed to talk about on the podcast? And we're doing a whole class and course on it.
Right. Well, since, I suppose it's been since the first handful of people we've ever been in coaching with or in a group with, a common theme is the amount and the frequency of which one needs to spend recovering, rejuvenating, recentering, whatever words you want to call it, to recover from whatever the day brought you. And it, that could have been extreme. It could have been from whatever your perspective is. It could have just been, I had to deal with people all day and I need some downtime to recover from that. And it wasn't so much that was true, because all of us need downtime. We all need to recover. We all need to rest. It was the frequency and the duration. And both of those together tended to block much of the greatest opportunity for relational engagement in the family. So if you come home from work and you are so overwhelmed, you need to spend an hour in your room doing whatever. That's, first thing you do when you come home from work, there might be kids that want to say hello, show you whatever it is they did at school that day, talk about their homework. Maybe they got their report card that day. Maybe they're really excited. Maybe one of the kids got dumped by their boyfriend or girlfriend and they're really sad and they want you to say hello or just sit with them. If you disappear for an hour, you don't get that window. So you lose those windows, right? And usually when you come home, it's probably not too far away from dinner. So you're missing that opportunity to help. So maybe there's some things going on that actually need some attention. Is maybe your wife is cooking dinner and there's a lot of noise and homework going on. And, if you've got small kids, there's no telling what's going on in the house.
Chaos.
And if you have a dog, you've got, you just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. And if one member comes home and actually has the ability to engage and help, that takes a lot of the effort off of the spouse that's also trying to accomplish a task. And when those things get hindered and blocked on a regular basis, then it causes the relationship to be at odds. There's angst, there's animosity that can build up in that. And since that was so common, it was, for a long time, I had been looking for a book that was specific, or a resource of any kind that was specific to what is it I can do to maybe not go so far down that trough. Maybe I can create capacity. Maybe I can handle this a little better so that I am not so depleted. It takes an hour of whatever to recover. Maybe I can do this in 10 minutes instead of that. Or maybe I could delay it until the effort of the dinner is done. If I could find something like that, we could engage when we're home, take some time later on in the evening, and then come back to, all right, now that the kids are in bed, let's play checkers or Scrabble or whatever, and engage with your wife. And then you helped, you recovered, and then you come back to engage once the kids are in bed. So, that's a general pattern. It doesn't have to be that, but that's the idea, is it doesn't get in the way anymore. And then when I saw this book, I was like, man, that's perfect. We knew who it was. We knew the background of it. We knew what the foundation of it was. So we were already engaged. When I read that, it's like, this is really what we want. How is it we can get less depleted and also recover quicker? And that's what this is.
And it started, you said, well, I'm going to do this, for the guys. And so I wanted to read it because I wanted to, It's kind of in the canon of things that we look at and study. And I was like, well, building balance and maturity and resilience and building capacity, we all need that no matter what your neurotype is, because you might be the spouse of someone on the spectrum, and maybe you've been together for years, decades with not knowing. And so there's been trauma, there's been repeated negative cycles, and you're at your wit's end, then you find out the diagnosis, and then that doesn't change things. Like, it puts a name to the experience, but it doesn't change things without intentional work. And then because couples have been in this cycle for such a long time, they want change now. Like,
right.
He got diagnosed last week and we haven't done anything new. And it's like, whoa, that's not a realistic expectation. So each person really needs to build their capacity and their resilience. And then another thing, and we weren't as guilty because I think we did try to be intentional about having margin. Like, family dinner was really important to you. I mean, you were the one that really made sure that happened, but families aren't eating together. They're not spending time together. They're going in a million different directions. They don't have margin in their life. So then when something does mess up, right, it causes bigger issue if one person's carrying the mental load of that and not having some shared responsibility. So really everybody needs capacity. So building balance kind of starts you off with like, how resilient are you, which ties into spiritual and emotional maturity. And the first part of the discussion is weight versus capacity. So talk about weight. I'll talk a little bit about capacity.
So I think a really good analogy is if you could put the idea of emotional and mental functioning in the same idea as physical functioning from a effort perspective. Some people can pick up 100 pounds and some people can pick up 200 pounds. That's what it is. That's just true. And it's that same idea of if I go to work every day and I have to pick this 100-pound thing up and take it up over there, some people are going to be able to do it and some people are not, because that's just how much strength they have in their body. So it's the same idea. So we want to be able to move more. Or the other idea in that is, if I have to pick up that 100-pound weight and move it over there, maybe I can do it 3 times, but my job is to do it all day long. And so not only do I need to be able to pick it up and take it over there, I need to be able to do that for longer. And that's the general idea. If I can engage in chaos, you come home, there's a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old and they're doing whatever and it's always loud. Yes, I can engage, but maybe I can only engage for 10 minutes before my circle. That is a weight, right? That you walk into the house and it's a cacophony is a weight. That is a stressor. You might have just come from work, which is the same thing. It was a stressor. You had to engage. Maybe there was a meeting that didn't go well, or
battle traffic on the way home.
Traffic on the way home, or maybe you lost a thing. Maybe your phone broke or whatever. It could have been any activity, and none of these necessarily have to be wrong. It's just regular life. Regular life is depleting. Regular life, you wake up and you're no longer asleep. So therefore, you're expending energy. It is a weight to make things happen. You have to get up, get ready, brush your teeth, all the things that require getting up and going. And then you have to go, you have to do it, and you have to come home. All of that is a stressor. It is a weight. And that's the idea of weight. It is the things you do, the things you endure, the things you put effort to. All of those things are depletion of your energy, and how much of that you can endure is what you're going to lead into with capacity.
Right. So there are some things that are not within your ability to change your day, some of your routine. And some people are just in a space. We're empty nesters, but some people might be in a space of caretaking for a parent while also working and maybe taking care of a grandchild or a special needs child or a child that can't leave home. So there are some things, like, life is really hard and it's not going to change for a while.
And sometimes extraneous things happen. Your car breaks down.
Or our story of the trees, when that first tree fell and we were out and we thought we'd be back home in a few months. And then the second tree fell, and then the third tree fell. We had, 4 State Farm not invoices, claims going out, 2 vehicles that we could not use, a house we couldn't use, and no access to our stuff. There was absolutely nothing we could control about any of that.
And those are extraneous, right?
During COVID, when there's a supply problem and a crooked contractor that we were dealing with, right? So none of those, and we were outside of our element, outside of our rhythms, outside of our patterns. Oh, and we moved one kid to graduate school and one kid across state to college, all at the same time. So that was just a very hard 20 months of life that there was nothing we could do to change the weight, because sometimes we can change the weight, build margin, but then sometimes you can't.
Right. Sometimes you can't. Kids have to go to school. And if you have, let's say you have 3 kids and they all go to different schools, you can't fix that.
Right.
It's just true. And the effort to get everyone to the right school on time every day is significant.
It's right?
Yeah.
And so where capacity comes in is how we handle that weight. How much weight can I handle and still remain my relational Christ identity self, or dysregulate and say and do things that are not me and God honoring, or I don't know if it's worse, but not great is if you have like a mental breakdown or physical breakdown because of the weight. So you have this weight and capacity. Weight is the stressors, the hard things, the traumas, the difficult circumstances, or just daily life.
And some of those can be good things. It takes effort to do good things.
Right. Like writing the book. That was an effort of love. But it was also a very difficult thing to do, to write and to edit and to get contributing authors chapters in and deal with the publisher and the marketing and all of that. That takes a lot of time. It's a good thing. Having your family home for Christmas and having 6 people in the house, but there's more people in the house and there's more activities. And, those are good things, but can cause,
it's still effort. It's still
people get dysregulated. So the capacity thing, right? So we talked about maybe your family needs to build more margin in. Maybe you got to let some things go. Maybe you can get rid of some weight. But for most of us, especially in a neurodiverse family system, your weight's not going anywhere. So we either got to figure out some sharing of the responsibility and sharing of the load, and or build our own internal capacity so our relationship can have greater capacity. And so that's where emotional resilience comes in, where even if my spouse is not willing to work on this with me, I still have choices. How am I going to go, or how am I going to stay? Am I going to show up, as Leslie Vernick would say, how am I showing up every day? And then Wilder and all of them would say, and you have a choice with your relationship circuits. You can turn your relationship circuits on with God. You can start practicing joy and appreciation and quieting and shalom, and you can manage you.
right.
It doesn't change the status of your relationship, but it does affect how you're going through it and your capacity to go through day-to-day life. So
let's just sit there a minute.
Okay.
Because talk about the value of you just being good at you. Let's say your relationship with your spouse is in not a good place, but you are able to manage yourself and get yourself into a better place. The effect that has on likely how you're going to relate to the kids in the house still has great value. Maybe it doesn't affect what's going on in the relationship. Maybe that's true. But all the people around you that are not in that relationship might see a greater version of you than they did before.
And that has huge value. Because, as we've been having talks with our kids and our youngest, coming to us about some things that she experienced or from her perspective and lived experience that we had to kind of go through and repair some of those things, because life was really hard when Sydney was getting kicked out of every school. And just that whole time period was hard, and living under stress and living under strained finances and me not being able to work full time. I would have liked to have, but that was not a possibility with our current situation. And then 2 siblings, 2 very different, one sensory seeking ADHD, one sensory aversive autistic plus some OCD, and them living in the same house, and our marriage not in a great place, and life was busy and hard. And right. So that had I got to a place, and all of this is in the Brown book, Embracing the Autism. But there was a day I was like, kind of no more. I am not going to live a joyless, unfulfilling, purposeless life. This cannot be my life from day to day, to get up and do this and repeat every day. I am having very bad thoughts. This is affecting my mental health. I'm not being the mom I want to be. I'm not being the person I want to be. I'm not being effective. All I can do is me. Sydney was still autistic, still getting kicked out of school. Our marriage was still where it was. But there had to be a effort on my part to find joy and to return to a joyful identity.